I'm Bobby Huynh, and let's queer up the USA view. FBI sends government plane to retrieve trans child from Cuba in gender-affirming care case. In a rare federal intervention, the FBI sent a government plane to Cuba to recover a child at the center of a custody dispute involving a trans parent. Authorities allege Rose Inessa-Ethington, a transgender woman, took her 10-year-old child to Cuba for potential gender-affirming care without the consent of the child's birth mother. The child, assigned male at birth, identified as a female and had been living under a shared custody agreement. A federal complaint filed in Utah states that Rose told the birth mother she was taking the child on a camping trip to Canada, but instead traveled to Cuba and stopped communicating after March 28th. The child was due to be returned on April 3rd. On April 13th, a Utah court ordered the child's return and granted sole custody to the birth mother. The U.S. Department of Justice confirmed on April 21st that the child has been reunited with her mother. Rose and her partner, Rose Inessa-Ethington, now faces federal charges of international parental kidnapping. The FBI's Violence Crimes Against Children unit led the investigation. Legal experts told the New York Times that deploying a government plane in a custody dispute is highly unusual. Donald Trump, at the beginning of the second term, issued an executive order banning gender-affirming care for minors. While federal courts have blocked the policy, the government's response in this case suggests the authorities are inclined to aggressive intervention in disputes concerning gender-affirming care. However, FBI officials claim the primary goal behind their approach was the child's safety and well-being. I'm just going to put a guess here that, if the child is not trans and the parent's not trans and this is not a trans-focused situation, the government would not have spent the resources to go to Cuba, which, by the way, is a country that is not exactly in harmony with the United States government, especially the current administration, in order to wrangle a kid back. I mean, this has aggressive law enforcement action this guy actually used to disguise scapegoating. Yes, as a family mediator, I understand the very frustration the birth mother faces. There's a shared custody agreement. You're taking the child to Cuba, to a country where if you want, you can disappear into the crowd and never be found again, and have your child go through gender-affirming care without both parties' consent. However, I'm wondering I'm not going to cast aspersion because I do not know all the facts of the case, but if the birth mother maybe refuses to even understand gender-affirming therapy, maybe that is why the other parent, the transgender parent, took the child to Cuba to do this therapy because it wasn't allowed to be done under the birth mother's watch.
Well, also there's a couple things. One, gender-affirming care for a 10-year-old tends to be puberty blockers, and Cuban doctors are still very well-trained doctors. They're not going to do something more extreme than that. But when you say the U.S. government doesn't have good relationships with Cuba, the United States is actively doing acts of war against the Cuban people right now with their blockade. People do not have access to gas and oil and cannot turn on cars and electricity because of what they're doing. But all that being said, it probably is a better place to be as a trans person than in the United States right now. That's where we are.
So a couple of things here. So I agree. We don't know if the birth mother, it's joint custody, so we don't know if the birth mother is in agreement with their child having, trans-affirming care, if they are in agreement with their child identifying as female. We don't hear that part of the story. So that, is a question mark for me. Unfortunately, I see this as international kidnapping, regardless of them being trans or not. So that right there in itself is a crime, and it does have consequences. I would like to take the trans part out of this.
Yes.
To be honest with you. I do agree that the federal government probably would not have stepped in as heavy if they had been
a cisgender couple
or child, but it is international kidnapping, and we already have a whole list of stuff that the FBI has been doing for people outside of their purview anyway.
Well, I mean,
Patel's girlfriend has been given security detail everywhere she goes. It's just the girlfriend. So the FBI is already doing stuff they're not supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's still a lot more to the story that needs to unfold.
Yes.
But I am sorry, this was international kidnapping
I hear you.
of a child.
For me, I can't take the trans out of the equation just because of the way the United States is treating trans people. That to me is where it gets.
I understand
I think it has to be centered on trans rights because, right now in the United States, we are actively trying to take away people's.
But that does not excuse you for kidnapping a child.
But we don't know the full fact. And if I had a trans kid, I definitely would think about leaving this country, regardless of if my spouse wants to join me or not, because you have to protect the kid.
But that's not her spouse. That's the problem. Is that it's co-parenting, and they're
other
separated.
Well, I'm wondering
if one is in that situation.
I'm wondering if the mother who brought the child and kidnapped had legal rights to the child, meaning she adopted when they had the child together, even though the birth mother remained behind. But as Rex mentioned, it's still kidnapping. And, my take on transgender rights,
yes.
So
but it's a tricky road.
Would it be kidnapping if a court did joint custody and one parent was Jewish with a Jewish kid in Germany in the 1930s? Would you consider it kidnapping? Legally, it would be. I would still side with that kid and that parent.
I'm not saying what they did is wrong as far as getting the child the care that the child needs, because it's hard to get that care within the United States,
especially Utah.
Exactly. However, you told a legal parent who has joint custody that you're going to Canada, and then you went to Cuba of all places. I mean, I'm sorry, that right there is wrong. The premise behind it might be correct, but the act in which you did makes it wrong.
I hear you, but it's a very common strategy to have to lie to the people you're fleeing from.
But
you don't know that they're fleeing from.
Yeah, but
that is fair.
Well, in Florida, we're always getting Amber Alerts. I do on my phone.
Sure.
So the horror of just being a parent and having your child, or being misled where your child's going.
In my experience as a family mediator, yes, I have had cases where one parent who is not American would threaten custodial kidnapping, and say that you'll never see your child again. You don't give me what you want. But on the other hand, I want to bring up a case that is from about 10 years ago. A lesbian couple have children, one child actually. Eventually they break up. One of the lesbians renounced that she became an ex-gay, so to speak, or ex-lesbian, and basically kidnapped the child, took them to Central America with the help of basically hiding behind a red line funded by evangelical churches. And till this day, no one sent an FBI plane to go find them and take them back.
Bob, that's like the best L-word plot I've ever heard, and we need more.
And I'm just saying that, this is an extraordinary step by this particular administration.
I do agree. I do agree.
Do you want to close out a comment?
No, I was just, I do agree that I think this is extreme. We have history lately of the FBI doing stuff that's out of their purview. So I don't think this would have been blown up as much, to your point. I just do want to say that, again, because all this stuff with the trans part of it, if we take that part out and call that a separate conversation, this could be and we don't know all the facts according to this.
Yes, well, we could talk about this, and this would be another great topic for a roundtable in more depth. There is no other queer nonprofit media platform like this in the entire world. Support our LGBTQ stories by sharing them and subscribing to Queer News Tonight.